Welcome to Season 3 of the Climate Conscious Podcast. I'm your host, Deval Bazi, bringing awareness to climate change and sustainable development from a Caribbean perspective. Connecting you to sustainability solutions as we move from awareness to action. Today I am joined by the three co-founders of Green Intelligence Business Solutions Limited, a consultancy based on the philosophy of green finance and the pivot to sustainability. They focus on strategic and operational risk, data analytics and business intelligence for sustainability, and corporate governance and integrated financial and sustainability reporting. I am delighted to welcome to the Climate Conscious Podcast Mr. Darrell Griffith, Mr. Brendan James, and Ms. Simoy Francis. Welcome, guys.
Hey.
Hi, happy to be here.
Hi, thank you for inviting us, Deval.
We all share a passion for sustainability, and we're all alumni of the MBA Sustainable Energy Management program at Atulokjak Graduate School of Business. But we all come from different backgrounds and have made the pivot to sustainability and are now helping others to do the same. So Darrell, your background is in economics, Brendan, energy and the oil and gas value chain, and Simoy, auditing and accounting. So I'm curious to know what led you on the scenic route to sustainability.
Well, for me, it was like everything in my life, an accident. I actually was an international finance guy, major, and I got the opportunity to actually join the sustainable energy program because at the time finance wasn't giving me the type of challenge, and so I actually moved into this area and I never looked back. It fit exactly with what I wanted to do and my personal values. So it was a little bit of an accident for me.
For me, coming from a economics and finance background, I actually had my career start in the oil and gas industry as well. The passion for sustainability really came when, I had just some opportunities to visit the United Nations and to work with NGOs. And I started to put those two together and realize that with the economics knowledge, really, I didn't see us going along a sustainable path. And, that led to research and really understanding of, what we need to change, what we need to transition. And I started to see later on, the world is pretty much aligning to that interest that I've came along with. So,
Well, I found that I wasn't getting the type of job satisfaction that I wanted. I wanted to be more hands-on in terms of really making an impact. And being a lover of nature, I wanted to pursue something professional in that area. And I sort of stumbled on, or across, I should say, the program in sustainability. And I decided to throw my hat in. And it basically has been a very interesting ride, I should say. I actually found that, I would be able to pull my passion as well as my background in finance to mesh it together to basically provide win-win solutions for both the environment and the business area, because I believe the two can coexist, and it's just about finding that right mix, and the compromises lies in sustainability.
Yeah, so listening to the three of you, you mentioned personal values. You mentioned a desire for change and also wanting to make an impact. And what I have observed is that, most people, they stumble into sustainability. We don't get into this field to become millionaires. It's generally linked to that desire to align our work and our contributions with our core values and also to engage in meaningful work. And I think that this field really offers that opportunity to anyone with that interest. So coming back to your consultancy, Green Intelligence Business Solutions Limited. It's an advisory service working across sectors to assist industries to manage sustainability risk. So what exactly is sustainability risk?
Good question. Well, as we know, the sustainability industry is ever changing as we try to find the best solutions to help us with that transition to a better future. The concept of sustainability risk really emerged from what risks, also opportunities would come out of that transition. What risk would businesses face in areas of transition, physical risk, financial risk associated with that change to, let's say, a low carbon economic system. A good example would be what technology, policies, changes in the financial system will a business have to deal with as we move towards a future climate scenario.
So, Simoy, I know you function at the intersection of finance and sustainability. How do these two sectors connect or intersect?
Well, really, the concept of sustainability has been around for some time now. And for the most part, sustainability and finance have sat or would seem to be on opposing ends of the argument when it comes to achieving economic growth. Sustainability activities are often perceived or to take away from the business maximizing its return. But one can argue that there has been a fundamental shift in people's mindset. And they are now arguing or seeing that in the long run, the cost of climate action might actually be lower than you think, and the benefits outweigh the cost. So what really caused the shift in mindset? And one of the main drivers, at least in recent times, has been the devastating economic and social fallout due to the extreme weather patterns that have basically made persons globally sit up and take notice. And it is actually expected that a lot of these events would increase in number and intensity. So there's basically a growing consensus that we need to re-engineer, our economies and re-examine our business models to be more resilient against such events. So when we look specifically at the finance sector, we're seeing the trend that, financial institutions are redefining their criteria for their investment decisions. And there's a greater appreciation, that the roles of financing entities to direct investment opportunities towards more lower carbonized economy. Therefore, the finance sector is in a unique position really to incentivize transition to become less dependent on fossil fuels and more climate and, drive that focus to a more climate conscious economy by agreeing to lend, to invest and ensure businesses that they manage their risk, their environmental risk and its impact. It's called sustainable finance. Right. For instance, there's substantial financial risk from investments in stranded assets per se, such as fossil fuels, that are high carbon, and they can't really be utilized in the world, if we have to stay below the required threshold of 2 degrees Celsius, in temperature rise. In the agriculture sector, you have, unpaid loans resulting from less favorable yields because, it's heavily reliant on, natural resources such as water. So it's not a matter of if finance needs to consider sustainability to really become, a very integral part of the financing world now.
Indeed. And we're seeing more and more that sustainability has to be integrated in all sectors. No business can continue without really factoring in these requirements into how they do business. And I think this is made even clear when we speak about carbon pricing. And I know that this is something that Brendan is very vocal about. So, Brendan, what is carbon pricing and what are the implications for us here in the region?
Right. My favorite topic, carbon pricing. So one of the things that we really looking at as one of the nexus points or triggers for the industry is a price on carbon. Now, it's phrased in different ways. You could call it directly a carbon tax. It could be a tax on dividend model, or a tax and investment model. It could also be a cap and trade type framework where you cap the amount of carbon that it could release, and then you issue permits and companies trade on these permits. It's different things in different jurisdictions, but essentially is a price on carbon. And it's built on the principle that a lot of environmental justice is built on, that if it is, you pollute, you should pay. As simple as that. Pollution is a business externality, right? And if you want to reduce carbon intensity in business, you have to make that externality an internality. So what does that mean? So if we apply a price on carbon, it is going to encourage companies to become much more efficient. In that, it's going to create the environment and the right incentives that allows them to now say, okay, let me try to invest in projects that will help me reduce carbon so that I do not have to have this additional cost in my balance sheet. And that in itself will be one of the things that we think will be a big nexus point moving forward in terms of a price on carbon. How is that going to impact on the cost of goods and services throughout the energy and the manufacturing and social systems and all of these things combined is the thing that is very interesting to us.
Carbon pricing, the theory, the economic theory is that you're going to motivate people to use less carbon-based products by effectively making them more expensive. But in practice, it might not be as simplistic as that, The key to successfully shift to a low carbon economy may likely require, significant restructure of our economies and society. A low carbon transition, should have the public buy-in and be socially just as well. Careful policy planning and, proactive communication of the benefits that it can bring to our communities, our workers and environment will be critical, as well as the carbon revenues. They need to be used to support other developmental policies to meet critical infrastructure and education. Also, as the business, traditional means of business and production might be disrupted when these climate policies ramp up. And we need a plan to support communities. It will also be important.
And earlier, Seymour, you mentioned when it comes to sustainability, the benefits outweigh the costs. And traditionally, when we speak about costs, we are speaking in economic terms. But we also need to account for the cost in terms of the environmental and the social cost. And that's where sustainability comes in. And I think for a long time, the focus across sectors has strictly been in economic terms and focused on, delivering dividends or returns to their investors and their shareholders. But now we're seeing where companies are being held accountable not only to shareholders and investors, but to stakeholders, which is the wider population, their consumers, their frontline community. And that in itself is presenting this sustainability risk because consumers are a lot more aware and they're making certain demands. So much so that we're seeing it particularly in the energy sector where oil and gas majors are making massive shifts in their business models away from carbon-intensive activities, such as, mainly oil and gas, towards this net zero ambition. So we're seeing it in that sector, we're seeing it at that level. But what does it mean for a Caribbean entity, or what does it mean for the consumer?
From an entity perspective, really and truly, what businesses need to do is to keep their eyes on, what's trending out there and future regulations that could possibly affect companies with regards to ESG reporting. And having a strategy and being prepared for those future regulations, would not only improve your bottom line in the long run, but it could allow you to avoid fees as well as worse implications of non-compliance, such as people not willing to do business with you. And most international and public companies are being evaluated and rated on their environmental, social, the ESG performance by various third-party providers of reports and institutional investors, asset managers, financial institutions, and other stakeholders are increasingly relying on these reports and credit ratings. So really and truly, you had where the EU recently, they passed a sustainable financial disclosure regulation. It was adopted in November 2019, but it actually came into effect March 2021. And what that regulation is for is it's basically aimed at ensuring that asset managers, financial investors, and other market participants take into account sustainability and ESG factors when making decisions around their investment. So this would in turn put pressures on businesses and governmental agencies that do businesses with their banks. And I saw recently where the European Investment Bank and the Caribbean Bank have basically signed a new agreement to deliver better support for climate resilient projects. So in a nutshell, when we want to get loans from foreign entities, we will need to conform to ESG factors in order to get loans.
One of the things that, in terms of what Seymour would have said, in terms of the disclosures, we see it as a step process too. Hoping that carbon pricing will come. It starts off with disclosures. And we believe that it's going to end up into having exclusionary practices. And those exclusionary practices will be around, if I'm a credit manager at a major international bank and I have to make a decision about who I extend lines of credit to. I am a business in Trinidad and Tobago that wants to expand, and I'm looking for international financiers, right? Who are these international financiers going to be willing to give money to in terms of preferential rates? If I am a huge user of energy and I release a lot of carbon dioxide and other greenhouse gases associated with my operations, it is very likely that I will be paying much more in terms of, or not be supported at all from these banks. And there's a whole idea around Scope 1, Scope 2, and Scope 3 emissions, which I'll kind of punt across to Daryl to actually talk a little bit about as well.
I was actually now going to jump in with that, so thanks, Brendan. When Brendan mentions Scope 1, Scope 2, and Scope 3, Scope 1 and Scope 2 are your typical emissions, whereas you calculate the energy use, the energy you buy, etc. But the concept of Scope 3, which is, is continually being looked at these major institutions, is how does emissions look in your entire value chain? And, we live in this large connected world. Someone from, example would be someone from Trinidad who is importing clothing from a European country as part of their business, is now at risk of being a part of that company's value chain for carbon. Trinidad and Tobago is not next door to the EU. Therefore, an international company shipping goods to Trinidad and Tobago is a very carbon intensive process. It's a lot more carbon intensive than what they're earning from the item itself. So Brendan mentioned something about exclusionary practices. The risk of, let's say, that clothes seller, who has a nice Trinidad audience, who enjoys high quality, low cost clothes from the EU, is now a risk for an international clothing company who's exporting 10 items to Trinidad. In their eyes, it may not be worth the carbon cost of sending this to Trinidad and Tobago to include that carbon intensity in my value chain. So that's kind of how I'm tying it all back to sustainability risk and, again, how it affects our local business and the average person who's buying from a retailer who's importing their goods. So just to show how it's all connected and where the world is kind of heading in terms of, measuring carbon and that low carbon economy.
And I want to share something too on another side of the coin in terms of when we look at the risk, because as a firm, we really focus in on strategy and risk. The other side, we could also look at it not just from the cost side, but from the geopolitical and investment side. Now, to kind of give it context, we see a relationship between investment, time, scale, and effort in terms of resources, energy resources allocated and developed, right? So there's a relationship. So the more you invest, the faster and much more efficient allocation of technology in the energy space happens. So here, the relationship we've been able to see was from the financial crisis. When Obama invested in the TARP program, the Troubled Asset Relief Program, he invested about $800 billion in the U.S. economy. And out of that $800 billion, about $150 billion was invested in green technologies, sustainable technologies. That was able to, if we look at solar as an example, was able to bring the prices for solar from about, let's say, averaging about 75 US cents a kilowatt hour, all the way to the first time it reached about 4 US cents a kilowatt hour in those markets was around 2017, 2018. So we're looking at a 10-year horizon that 150 billion would have paid out dividends. Let's look at the investment cycle now. President Biden is going to invest $2 trillion in infrastructure. That $2 trillion, when you look at the details of that, a lot of it is going to be focused on green technologies and climate-friendly technologies. That is going to be that is going to impact the entire market, and the plan is to do that in 4 years. So if we could achieve this with $150 billion, what could we achieve with $2 trillion in 4 years? And if you look at the European Union, they committed about $7 trillion between now and 2027. So if you are a business in Trinidad and Tobago and you're looking at that sort of investment cycle, wouldn't you think about a sustainability strategy to move forward with?
Yes, and I like where we're at right now in terms of the discussion. So, my audience, it comprises of persons in various fields. We'll have some C-level executives listening, and they may be wondering, or you may now have them considering their business model and whether or not they are adequately catering or adequately considering climate and sustainability risk. So if a local or regional company decides that, hey, I see how I can be impacted by this global development, what will you advise them in terms of start initiating this process to manage their sustainability and their climate risk?
What I would say to any executive is that you have to do the groundwork. Understanding risk, the process of understanding risk is taking an honest look at your business model, assessing the right risk, developing metrics and targets, and using that data to create a strategy that aligns with future climate scenarios. But I want to touch a bit about data. Data has a strong role to play in executive decision making. An example I always like to use on the impact of sustainability data on organizations is a simple one. I track my meals every day. I input what I eat for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And I track to see where I'm at and, what goals I want to achieve. And the time I start to go over that target is where I start to get hesitant about what I choose to do or what I choose to eat. It's the same thing when it comes to sustainability data and carbon data. An organization, honestly, looking at all its activities from logistics to products to the office space, and having a complete assessment of that in terms of the carbon intensity of all its activities, and having real-time data flows to carefully understand and see how each business decision affects where you are, how carbon intensive your business are. It makes a great impact on business decision making. So for any executive, I would advise to do the groundwork, to have a full understanding of the concepts, the future scenarios, your organization, how carbon intensive is it, what risks are there, and what projects looking forward that I can do to get myself towards a situation where I can satisfy the requirements of my local stakeholders, my international stakeholders in a connected business.
And what Darrell would have highlighted there and is one of the core principles that we follow, right? The old Deming phrase that in God we trust and all others bring data. So a major part of how we approach business is by using data to drive decision making. But even once I decide I have to identify certain data sets that must be tracked and has to be managed, I have to understand what my risks are. And in understanding what my risks are, I need to understand, of course, where I want to go. Businesses must understand what are the risks that their strategies face. I'm a business executive. I have 3 projects that I'm being asked to set up for financing. And I'm thinking about the future. How will these projects kind of pan themselves out? What are the criteria I'm going to use to assess these projects to help me make a good decision? How am I going to frame that? How am I going to execute that? I need a process, right? So there are many standards that are associated, and we call it different things. Some people say strategic risk management. Some people go and talk about enterprise risk management, ISO 31000 standard. However we decide to do it, it all helps gears us towards identifying those risks and identifying the uncertainty. And I really want your audience to understand this, there's a difference between risk as a concept and uncertainty, right? Risk is what you're aware of. Uncertainty is what you're not aware of. What you try to do is convert uncertainty to risk. Because risk, you have a pretty good idea of your probability and consequence of associated with a decision or event. The uncertainty, which is in the realm of climate change and sustainability, is what we also are about managing. So there's a difference in those two concepts.
Thank you for making that distinction, Brendan, in terms of risk versus uncertainty, and also for outlining, a framework that can be adopted for organizations that really want to start managing their sustainability risk and also preparing as best as they could for the uncertainties before us. We have covered a lot of ground this evening, although in one sense, we've just scratched the surface when it comes to business risk. But I think we've given our listeners some really good insights into the application of sustainability finance, the implications of carbon pricing, the importance of data, and the imperative of a low carbon strategy.
First of all, Deval, it's always a pleasure having a chat with you. And thank you for inviting us, me and my colleagues who really are passionate about this topic, who came together, various backgrounds, different ways of seeing the problem, but realize there's a through line in the way that we see sustainability and risk. And, for your audience, I really want to give a certain level of urgency. Because there's a general view amongst us at Green Intelligence that the future is not 20 years away, or maybe even 10 years away, or maybe even 5 years away. We think it's happening right now. And I know that sounds like the nice terminology, the management speak, but there's a lot of evidence, and Seymour would have given examples of legislation that has passed, that has passed that it may impact your business next year, right? These are things that we all have to be cognizant of. So businesses across the world, because I know we have an international audience, and businesses in a local context, you really need to start thinking about your strategy and your supply chain risks, and really develop strategies to manage those risks, because it is a possibility that your cost structure and could be severely impacted by the changes that will need to happen to deal with the climate crisis. Thank you.
My colleague said it perfectly. Thanks for giving us the space to discuss this quickly emerging but very important topic. We believe that everyone has to be on top of this within the next 2 to 5 years, as typically I would say once the financial systems of the world have started to move, you have to move as well, or you run the risk of being kept significantly behind. And it's not something we want to happen to our country or region. So, we want to really help every business to take an honest look at themselves and determine, if they're ready for the future and, how we can help them get there.
Where can listeners connect with Green Intelligence Business Solutions Limited?
Feel free to reach out to us on our LinkedIn page. It's Green Intelligence Business Solutions Limited on LinkedIn. And there we also post a lot of education and awareness on the topic of climate risk itself. So feel free to follow our page and reach out to us if you're curious about understanding your business and sustainability risk.
Thank you for listening to the Climate Conscious Podcast. If you haven't already, please subscribe and connect with us on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter at The Climate Conscious. And be sure to check out the Climate Conscious Lifestyle Kit.